Hi, everybody. I wanted to open up by quoting some of the talk that I gave last weekend. It was at a Peace and Freedom Party convention to decide who would represent them. It's a independent socialist, mainly electoral, grouping that's had ballot status in California since 1967, when they first nominated Eldridge Cleaver, who was the Minister of Information of the Black Panther Party at that time, as their first presidential candidate. So they have a history of supporting, the national liberation movements like the Panthers and so forth. They've also supported Angela Davis and other, progressive, revolutionary candidates throughout the year. And so Brother Lamont and I were being considered as their representatives in this year's 2016 presidential race. We didn't win, but I think we made a tremendous impact when we really were pushing for more solidarity for the Black Lives Matter movement. But anyway, I just wanted to share with you all some of the opening remarks that I made, because I think they're very much, they speak to what the topic is today, and that is the need for solidarity for the most oppressed people and movements in this country and around the world. So this is how I started out. This year marks the 50th anniversary of the founding of the Black Panther Party in the fall of 1966. Some may want to point out the imperfections of the Black Panthers and their leaders. However, the incredible fact that not only were the Panthers able to do so much, survive so long, and do so in spite of violent and ever-increasing state repression, the Panthers, with minimal support from the organized left movement back then, evolved into the most ideologically revolutionary expression of the Black liberation movement. As we celebrate that tremendous anniversary this year, let us be sure to remember the most enduring and the most painful lesson that we learned from that period. We believe that the ability of the FBI's COINTELPRO and all the forces of racist capitalist state to jail, murder, and otherwise disrupt and crush the Panthers reflected the unfortunate reality that the political movement was at best divided over supporting the Panthers against this brutal repression, and at worst did not do nearly enough to prevent the Panthers from being politically isolated. When liberation movements are isolated, it is far easier for the capitalist state to carry out its dirty work with the aim of weakening the overall revolutionary movement. Workers' World Party believes that the Black Lives Matter movement represents even more than a continuation of the age-old struggle against racist police repression and terror. Indeed, we believe that the Black Lives Matter uprising, which is international in scope, reflects the awakening of a section of the working class that is being transformed by capitalist globalization and technology. There is an economic and social basis for the increase in police repression and murder in Black and brown and indigenous communities. It is the same economic and social basis for mass incarceration. So just to add on to that, so 50 years ago, it was the Black Panther Party that was in the forefront of the Black liberation struggle. Today, it is the Black Lives Matter movement. Comparing these two eras shows that class struggle may take on different forms, but the essence is the same when it comes to the struggle for national liberation and ultimately revolutionary socialism. Both Jonathan Jackson and George Jackson were individuals who reflected the revolutionary period of their time. Just as the Vietnamese were in the process of defeating the military prowess of U.S. imperialism. And just as the Black Panther Party evolved into the most influential expression of the right to self-determination for Black people in this country, and internationalism for other sectors of the movement. The prisons were very much a part of this revolutionary period because they played a dual role of being concentration camps for the poor, as they are today, and also schools for developing revolutionary consciousness, like George Lester Jackson. Like many youth today, George Jackson was 18 years old when he was convicted for stealing $70. And this brought about a second-degree robbery charge and indictment. And he received a 1-year to life sentence in California. He spent most of his 11 years in prison in solitary confinement. So what did he do? How did he resist these unbearable hours, days, and years of torture, just like we just saw with Sekou Odinga and others? Books. Books became George Jackson's lifeline, and not just any books. The writings of Karl Marx and Vladimir Lenin and Mao Zedong, Frantz Fanon, Kwame Nkrumah, Che Guevara, and other revolutionary thinkers, they became his best friends. And Jackson would say in his book, I think it was Soledad Brothers or Blood in My Eye, one of them, he stated that, quote, he felt redeemed, and that, quote, I have been in rebellion all my life, and I just didn't know it, end quote. He eventually proclaimed himself to be a revolutionary communist. Due to the fear that the prison authorities had for Jackson's being more than just a political prisoner, but also a leader of the Black Panther Party, he was respected not only by prisoners in California. He had gained such a reputation throughout the prison system in California, one of the largest in the world, but around the country to a revolutionary, but also throughout the country, he had gained this reputation. And so because of this, because of the growing fear that the prison authorities had for, George Jackson's growing influence, when he was talking about uniting all the prisoners, he was talking about uniting Black and Latino and white and Asian, all the prisoners against the same common enemy. He was eventually assassinated on August 21st, 1971. And tomorrow is the 45th anniversary of this cowardly act. At George Jackson's funeral, which was attended by thousands of people, Huey P. Newton, who's one of the founding members of the Black Panther Party, eulogized George Jackson. And I want to read a very moving passage from that eulogy that's in Blood in My Eye. This was the second and last book that George Jackson wrote. And it was written and completed just 1 week before he was killed. And these are the words of Huey P. Newton. When I went to prison in 1967, I met George, not physically, but through his ideas, his thoughts, and his words. He was at Soledad Prison at the time, and I was at California Penal Colony. George was a legendary figure throughout the prison system, where he spent most of his life. I met George through his spirit. Shortly after learning about him, I got word through the prison grapevine that he wanted to join the Black Panther Party. At his request, he was made a member of the People's Revolutionary Army with the rank of General and Field Marshal. He was put in charge of the prison recruiting and was asked to go on with his life as a revolutionary example, which was the most important thing that one can ever do, because they cannot be killed. I say that the legendary figure is also a hero. George Jackson was my hero. He set a standard for prisoners, political prisoners, for people. He showed the love, the strength, the revolutionary fervor that's characteristic of any soldier for the people. He inspired prisoners, whom I later encountered, to put his ideas into practice, and so his spirit became a living thing. Today I say that George's body has fallen. Although George's body has fallen, his spirit goes on because his ideas live. And we will see that these ideas stay alive because they'll be manifested in our bodies and in these young Panthers' bodies who are our children. So it's a true saying that there will be revolution from one generation to the next. This was George's legacy, and he will go on. He will go on into immortality because we believe that the people will win. We know the people will win as they advance generation upon generation. And that's from Huey Newton. And just to show what kind of revolutionary, legendary legacy that George Jackson left, just 3 weeks after his murder at San Quentin Prison, the heroic Attica Prison Rebellion erupted in upstate New York, in which our party, through its mass organization, the Prisoner Solidarity Committee, played a pivotal role in showing solidarity by sending one of its leaders, Tom Soto, as an observer inside the prison during the negotiations, as an observer. And this was at the request of the Attica prisoners. And I brought this display over here. It's from our newspaper from 1970 and 71. You can't really read the articles, and we'll make sure to get them up online on workers.org, but it gives you a sense of the period of the time, if you look at the headlines. And our party was really in great solidarity, concrete solidarity, with not only the Panthers, but this whole revolutionary period. So anyway, what happened is that many of the leaders of the Attica Rebellion acknowledged the inspiring role that George played in this revolutionary act of resistance, because the conditions in Attica prison were just medieval, just horrific conditions, forcing the prisoners to strike and to rebel. And next month, with the anniversary coming up, we're going to put out another display of an 8-page special edition of Workers' World Party from the paper on the Attica Rebellion. It lists at least 20 demands that the prisoners made in terms of being recognized as workers. They wanted to be recognized. They wanted to be unionized. They wanted an 8-hour day. They wanted amnesty to go to Cuba and North Korea. These were very, very revolutionary prisoners. And what happened is that 4 or 5 days after the rebellion started, the then Governor Nelson Rockefeller, whose family is a big part of the ruling class even today, he was governor at the time, and he called out the National Guard, and 43 people were killed, mowed down, and the majority of them were prisoners, but also some of them were the hostages. They killed all the hostages and the leaders of the Attica Rebellion. And as you saw here, just a year earlier, Jonathan Jackson, just 17 years old, was slaughtered in a hail of bullets along with black prisoners William Christmas and James McLean on August 7th, 1970, in an effort to try to free George Jackson and the Soledad brothers. Now, Ruchell Magee, who has been in prison for almost 50 years, he's one of the longest held political prisoners in this country. He's still in the California prison system, and he actually gets our Workers' World newspaper. He's been getting it for many, many decades. So after what happened at San Rafael Courthouse, many in the traditional left movement they denounced Jonathan Jackson. They denounced his actions. They called them, they would say they was adventurous, it was ultra-left, and just, it was really a terrible situation politically. But our party took a more thoughtful position in defending this action to show that more than anything else, these type of bold actions needed class solidarity against racist state repression, including the courts. And again, I want to read something that was written in Workers' World. It's on the display, but you really can't read it. It was written by one of our Secretariat members, Fred Goldstein, who's also the author of Capitalism at a Dead End. And he wrote really a powerful, moving testimony to what happened at the courthouse, and it's called The Heroes of San Rafael. And I just wanted to read just a portion of this, because it gives you a flavor of what was happening, back then. In a flash of revolutionary daring, the heroes of San Rafael breached the fortress of the enemy, where he thought he was impregnable. In the court, they assailed that onerous organ which has been held sacred and inviolable by ruling classes throughout history. Since the dawn of class society, this institution has served the rich, the exploiters, as the arena of class discipline, where the poor are held to account for every act of rebellion, be it large or small, personal or political, against exploitation and class domination. In all areas of life, there is no place where the master class has grown so accustomed to submission than in the court. Therein lies a great political, moral, and psychological victory won for the Black liberation struggle at San Rafael, inscribed indelibly into the minds of thousands of as yet anonymous revolutionaries who cannot be inspired, but be inspired by such a heroic exploit. This example alone has already prepared a future augmentation of the forces of liberation. Psychologically, the slave masters have been terrified by the boldness and the tactical conception. The tension in the ruling class must increase tremendously as a result. No court is safe anymore. Blind passivity and fatal acceptance by its victims can no longer be taken for granted by the enemy. Every prison has become a cadre school of the oppressed. The courts will have to become armed camps, and they are today. The bourgeoisie will have to show the people its teeth in every, quote, hall of justice, end quote, across the country. The tactic of San Rafael flows directly from the present stage of the struggle. The revolution, the war of liberation, has sunk into the bones of the people. There is a universal desire to struggle, but the people have not yet created an army capable of dealing the enemy blow for blow on an equal basis, capable of smashing the power of the oppressor. So sisters and brothers, comrades and friends, what hasn't changed fundamentally from 40 years to 50 years ago to what's happening today is that globalization or no globalization, the repressive state, that is the police, the courts, and prisons, remain a constant reminder that class society exists as long as capitalism exists, that white supremacy exists as long as capitalism exists, and repression exists in general as long as capitalism exists, no matter the changes in form or tactics. That war and occupation from Haiti to Puerto Rico to Syria to Palestine to Libya exist as long as capitalism and imperialism exist. One of the most important messages from our election campaign this year is this: a genuine revolutionary socialist movement cannot move forward if our answer to the question of uniting the working class is to advise all involved to minimize and marginalize the importance of combating racism, the oppression of immigrant workers, the oppression of women, the oppression of lesbian, gay, bi, transgender, and queer people, all for the, quote, sake of unity. We must do the opposite of that. Unity and trust within the working class and within our socialist movement can only be accomplished by making the issues of the most oppressed central to our movement. Just as it was the failure on the part of many left forces to make racism the pivotal struggle when the Panthers and other national liberation movements were being undermined and destroyed by the racist US government, a huge failure of the Bernie Sanders campaign was to recognize the centrality of the struggle against racism as embodied by the Black Lives Matter movement. And of course, we can't forget Trump's racism when it comes to immigrants and Muslims. The revolutionary movement needs to step up its efforts to show solidarity with the most oppressed, the most vulnerable of our class. The global changes in the capitalist system render larger and larger sections of the oppressed working class, quote unquote, expendable, as far as the system is concerned. Since capitalism no longer needs their labor, they are subject to murder and prison, in effect a war that threatens the very survival of Black and brown people. And because of the prevalence of police murder and occupation, this can many times overshadow mass incarceration. There are over 2 million of our class in these concentration camps, the world's largest prison population. Many wind up in prison or jails for the so-called crime of being poor and also with mental disabilities. But many of them become revolutionary fighters, nonetheless, like George Jackson. And on September 9th, a nationwide prison strike will be happening on the 45th anniversary of the Attica Uprising. And I understand you all are discussing ways of showing solidarity with this very important anniversary. And this is, in New York City, we're doing the same, and also around the country. So whatever the prisoners decide to do, whatever form it takes, we should show solidarity with them out on the outside. So let's do everything we can to keep alive the legacy of Black August, including the fighting spirit of George Jackson and Jonathan Jackson, by urging the movement to defend and support, in words and in deeds, the Black Lives Matter struggle, which is an extension of the struggle for Black power that was first raised 50 years ago. As the martyred Fred Hampton, also a leader of the Black Panther Party, once said, "You can kill a revolutionary, but you can't kill the revolution." Black Lives Matter. Long live international solidarity with the workers and oppressed. Thank you.